Officer Jody Thompson pulled into the Oklahoma Police Department parking lot just as a distraught 7-year-old boy, his eyes watering, dialed the emergency line. Thompson paid attention to the dispatch because of the urgency with which it dealt with an instance of physical child abuse. He jumped in without thinking, reporting the disturbing situation by dialing 911. Thompson, who has been investigating cases of child abuse for 16 years, felt driven to take action even though he was not on duty. Being a former district attorney's office investigator gave him the expertise, skills, and determination to respond effectively. Upon arrival, Thompson was met with a disturbing sight, a child who was extremely underweight, with belts bound around his wrists, bruises all over his delicate body, and a large knot on top of his head. The boy had endured unspeakable brutality as he was dipped in frigid water within a garbage can, even at a mere 61 pounds. The mental and bodily burden on the child was palpable. He was covered in bruises and wounds from maltreatment, and Thompson said it was the most horrible thing he had ever seen. Quick on his feet, Thompson got the little boy, named John, to a children's advocacy center in Oklahoma so he could get medical attention right away. There, officials could record the occurrence in detail and give John the help he needed to get well. Thompson went out of his way to accompany John to the emergency department after the doctors finished treating him. I just so happened to be sitting next to him, Thompson recalled with great detail. And then, after he was admitted to the intensive care unit, I sat in the waiting room for the rest of the night and into the next day. John could always count on Thompson's undying devotion. His first image of the devastated boy was so strong that he would do anything to remain by John's side. I was adamant about keeping John in my line of sight, Thompson said. From the moment I laid eyes on him, I knew I wanted to be his caregiver for the rest of his life. As soon as I saw him in that house, shivering and with his wrists tied, dripping wet and bewildered, I knew he would be safest in my company, he said. I knew there was no other way for me to be content and assured that he was safe except to be with him. The next day, Thompson proactively contacted the Oklahoma DHS to inquire about the requirements to become a licensed foster parent in the Sooner State. Thompson made all the required preparations to ensure that John would have a secure and caring home. When the two were through exploring, Thompson and John went back to their house. At the time, I was the father of a 15-year-old son and an 8-year-old child. So I could relate, Thompson told the gathering. I didn't tell my parents or my wife that I'd brought John back home with me. Everyone put their faith in Thompson's judgment before they understood the circumstances or heard the whole story. Thompson invited John into his home on April 30, 2015. Thus starting a unique journey. The unexpected news that Thompson's wife was expecting their third biological kid came just 2 days afterward. However, the story takes a dramatic turn after that, Thompson said in his conclusion. On November 3, 2015, the Department of Homeland Security called the Thompsons to let them know that John's mom had given birth to a baby girl while in detention. The Thompsons were approached by officials who inquired about their interest in perhaps caring for her. Paisley joined their family at the tender age of 1 day old when her parents, Thompson and his sister, picked her up from the hospital the next day and brought her home immediately. God had other plans for our lives. And here we are. Even though I never in my wildest dreams thought I'd be a father to a huge family. In addition, I'm having a blast doing it all. In August of that year, Thompson was designated as the legal guardian of John when his original parents, who were awaiting trial for criminal charges, had their parental rights terminated. People who were hesitant to give up Paisley's custody were vocal in their protest. But the Thompsons persisted nevertheless. They finally got the go-light to adopt Paisley on February 16 after a protracted jury trial and appeal. At one point during the trial, Thompson brought up his son, calling him the hardest kid I've ever known. It was his son, he said, who was to testify in his place. In spite of everything that has happened, the Thompson family is ready to go on. John, who is now 10 years old, is characterized as being absolutely remarkable. In addition to being an active member of his community's theater club, his academic achievements have earned him a spot in the gifted and talented program. John took great pride in standing beside Thompson when he accepted a certificate of commendation from the Oklahoma Bureau of Investigations at a ceremony. In a statement released in response to the incident, Police Chief Stephen lauded Thompson for being an exemplary leader in terms of compassion and love. And he expressed his gratitude for the opportunity to serve alongside Thompson. Thompson stressed in his statement that John recently decided to tell his story in the hopes of helping other victims of abuse who are going through the same thing. Despite everything that we have been through, we refuse to let it shape our identity. Our aspirations will be unimpeded by anything. And we will not be deterred, Thompson stressed. Revisiting his dedication to empathy. Always be compassionate because you never know what you're about to walk into. Another touching story is an Arizona police officer who met a little girl while doing a welfare check and made the incredible choice to give her a forever home. Night Shift Patrol Sergeant for the Kingman Police Department Lieutenant Brian Zach was dispatched to a residence after receiving a call to check on the residents. It had been 2.5 years since the incident had occurred when he stumbled across Kayla, who is now 4 years old, he said. I immediately saw that something wasn't quite right with her. Zach made sure Kayla got the help she needed after seeing warning signals of abuse. She was escorted back to the station when all was attended to. It was a great chance to spend time together watching the film Wreck-It Ralph, Zach told the group. This assault was the third recorded incident of abuse against Kayla. And she had sustained serious injuries as a result. Zach couldn't stop thinking about Kayla. Even though he was already a father of 2. He wanted to bring the little girl he had met home with him. So he told his wife about her that night. When CPS sought a temporary home for Kayla, they gladly accepted her with her wholehearted support. We took good care of her because we didn't know when she would return, if at all, to her family. And we simply went with the flow of each day, taking it day by day, according to Zach. Months past became years. And weeks into months again. The Zachs were able to complete the adoption of Kayla in August. The most exciting thing that has happened in 2020 is that we have officially welcomed a new family member. Zach exclaimed with enthusiasm. Thanks to her newfound familial ties, Kayla was able to express her appreciation by adding, I adore him terribly. These tales show how one person's kindness may change another life for the better. After watching the first story above, do you have any thoughts? Feel free to share your opinions in the comments section. Next, let's watch another similar story. The relentless chirping of birds since dawn had grown unbearably irksome. The man felt an urge to shoo them away or drown out their songs with louder music, just to silence their incessant melodies. John's frustration brewed when he had planned to indulge in an extra hour of sleep, only to be rudely awakened by the birds, igniting an uncontrollable fury within him. He harbored a deep-seated resentment towards birds, associating them with happier times he could no longer reclaim. This bitterness extended inward, when he lamented his past decisions and his inability to make things right. What once seemed like the right choice now appeared misguided in hindsight, highlighting the difficulty of rectifying past mistakes. Forced to start his day, John mechanically went through his morning routine, the monotony of his actions reflecting the repetitive nature of his life. Each day felt like a dull repetition of the last, akin to being trapped in a perpetual time loop where every event felt painfully familiar. However, today promised a deviation from his usual routine, a potential escape from his rut. As John headed towards the office building, he encountered an unexpected sight, a ragged child. Unlike any beggar he had encountered before, his presence near the guarded business center raised John's suspicions, prompting him to scrutinize the situation. The child's desperate plea for help tugged at John's conscience, challenging his preconceptions about beggars and their motives. Despite his initial inclination to ignore the boy, John found himself unable to turn a blind eye to the child's distress, prompting him to reconsider his actions. He would typically have brushed the boy off, his pockets devoid of change or cash since he relied solely on cards for transactions, reserving cash withdrawals for emergencies. I don't have any money. Go find someone else, John grumbled, attempting to push the persistent child away. But the boy remained steadfast, his pleading eyes betraying his hunger and destitution, evident from his threadbare attire clinging to his emaciated frame. Despite his growing impatience, John wrestled with conflicting thoughts. He was accustomed to contributing generously to charitable causes each month. Yet he often wondered where his donations truly ended up. Could he trust this child not to be exploited by others? The youngster muttered, "My dad will help," briefly leaving John speechless. John paused for a moment before laughing, understanding the child had thought he was someone else. He was used to individuals trying to take advantage of his fortune. They would frequently use kids as pawns in their plots. His spine tingled at the mention of John Reynolds' name, alerting him to potential scandal-seeking media. He hated how the media was always changing the truth to fit its storylines and using lies and half-truths to manipulate public opinion. John seized the boy's hand and ushered him off, muttering, Seems like you're pushing it a bit, kid. Even though he had an intimidating appearance, he was hesitant to use too much force since he thought the youngster might be weak. To his astonishment, though, the boy turned out to be more resilient than he had anticipated. Unexpected resistance to John's grasp of the boy's hand resulted in curious looks from bystanders, which only made him feel more uneasy. He was half expecting the boy's mother to step out of the shadows and demand a huge ransom, accusing him of abusing her child. John's blood pressure shot through the roof and his headache grew even more intense at the mere notion. John angrily said, "Who do you think I am?" "Your father," while glaring at the youngster. "I have never had children and I don't now." It was unlikely that this boy was his illegitimate child, even if he couldn't completely rule out the possibility given his turbulent history. "My mom told me that you're my dad," the youngster stammered, shaking as he reached into his pockets. "Did your mom tell you anything else? Like about aliens living in space? For example?" he asked, pausing to add with a trace of doubt. The boy reached into his pocket and pulled out a jade ring, which made John's heart skip a beat. John recognized the complex design right away, and his disbelief was evident. This exact ring was one he had made himself and given to his sweetheart years ago, when he was learning how to make jewelry under his grandfather's tutelage. But it was before he gave up to a wild life motivated by ambition and money, which finally caused their lifetime separation. John gripped the ring tightly and murmured, "Come with me," between clenched teeth, swallowing the knot in his throat. He could have pretended not to know. Written off the ring as just another bauble, easily found in the black markets. However, he knew better in his heart. John noticed that his heartbeat wasn't beating steadily when they strolled along. This is concerning given his advanced age. He was aware that a medical professional would have warned him about arrhythmia, but he couldn't help but feel that the physical illness he was experiencing could be better than the rush of adrenaline he was feeling just now. He looked at the boy next to him, amazed at this unplanned reunion with his former self. 11 years after he had broken up with Lizzie, his thoughts was filled with images of their perfect times spent on the patio, by the lake, and in the forest, where the sound of the birds used to comfort them. Those same songs now become painful reminders of Lizzie, of her beauty, her easygoing nature, her generosity. John felt an emptiness in his soul since she was gone, a place where memories and feelings mingled under layers of regret. John was irritated and frustrated by the looks and murmurs of onlookers as they made their way to his office. Although he was unable to understand why he had become involved in the boy's situation, he was compelled to continue due to a strong sense of duty. "Are you sure you're my son?" When they arrived at his office, John questioned while squinting a little. The child gave a sincere nod. "Mum showed me the photos you took. Only you can help me," she stated. John was filled with questions, wondering why Lizzie had concealed his son from him for so long. John was shocked to learn of Lizzie's incarceration from the boy. How could the perfect woman he had once loved be imprisoned? Had she really changed that much in all these years? John's mind raced with doubt and incredulity when he slumped into his chair. He knew there was nothing he could do about the issue, which was considerably more complicated than he had ever thought. He felt sorrow as he understood that his past was coming back to haunt him, demanding an explanation and a conclusion. It seemed like the boy in front of him was older than he actually was. He was clearly afraid, yet his eyes showed that he was still a child. "What's your name, kid?" John inquired of Ryan. "Dad wanted to name me according to my mother. She never gave me any prior information about you or the location of your disappearance. She was forced to give me the ring and seek for your assistance when the police arrived. I didn't want to go to an orphanage, and we don't have anyone else. There is no one who will assist my mom there, and it is a bad environment. What's your mom's name?" Notwithstanding the growing evidence, John remained steadfast in his refusal to acknowledge that this may be his son. "Lizzie. You're aware of her name?" The boy answered. "Her significant other. Mom saved newspaper clippings that featured your interviews. It didn't occur to me at first why she was gathering them, but then it did. She was terrified to tell me about you, and I don't know why. Without a purpose like this one, I would not have come. And why did they arrest your mom?" Even though John understood he should be concentrating on how to assist, he persisted. "Mrs. Garrison, our neighbor, was extremely ill. She was the only one who ever assisted us. My mom was at work when she came to stay with me. To me, she resembled a granny. Because she worked in a hospital. My mother had access to difficult-to-get medications. Mrs. Garrison was forced to wait for permissions. But how long could she stand by while the poor woman, going through all the formalities, was in agony? Anyway, when Mrs. Garrison received her medication, my mother made the decision to take it and give it back. However, they became aware. She received a sentence because it was determined that she acted too soon when she could have waited for the medication to be given away for free. Thank goodness. Mrs. Garrison was brought to the hospital and is now receiving expert care. I have no idea how to free my mom. If I had the means to buy off anybody I needed to, I would. Ryan trailed off, clearly frustrated. John shook his head and groaned. Kid, you're still too young to be resorting to bribes. But I'm a real man. Ryan objected. I am a boy, don't criticize me for that. Anything for my mother, I would do. It dawned on John at that very instant that he was speaking with a fully grown adult instead of a toddler. Ryan was just 10 years old, based on preliminary estimates. But he spoke with maturity well above his years. Okay. Let's think out a plan to release your mother together. John admitted. They ought not to have put her in jail for that. And we'll think about paying for it if needed. With a shake of his head, Ryan said. I don't have any money. Selling the ring was severely forbidden by his mother, who emphasized its emergency value. She said I should only part with it if my life were in danger. But otherwise, I must keep it safe. John felt his heart tighten. The old feeling of being suffocated coming back. It was hard to look back on the old days, when he had been so happy and then decided to give it all up. If he had opted for love over money, how would his life now be different? The choices were endless. He might be farming or employed by a firm. However, those speculations were now pointless. Calling his secretary, John made quick work of getting Ryan dressed and fed so he could stay in the office for the meeting. He gave the secretary a firm warning that there would be dire repercussions if Ryan disappeared. John couldn't help but think about Lizzie during the meeting. She was a constant reminder of the past. She consistently showed excessive kindness and selflessness, prioritizing the needs of others over her own needs. She was a real angel who never wavered in her giving. John was struck with dread at the notion of what was ahead. But he was determined to get Lizzie out of this position at any costs. He couldn't let her suffer. He didn't expect a cordial reception from her, despite Ryan's efforts to come across as mature and self-sufficient. John felt it would be wrong to ask a youngster such questions regarding his mother's situation. Had she raised him alone? If she had a husband? Etc. After the meeting, John came back to the office to find Ryan satiated but unhappy. He felt very much the loss of his mother. They were each other's only family. Though Lizzie always treated him like a kid, she supported Ryan's independence. Ryan worked part-time jobs in their little town and bought her gifts just to see her happy, fearing being apart from him. Lizzie worked hard to settle bills from when Ryan was a little child and frequently ill. Their savior was Mrs. Garrison. Ryan was aware of his mother's internal conflict and her suffering over the choice she finally made. Observing her shocked expression when the cops confronted her, he knew she had been set up. She begged. I only took one to help Mrs. Garrison, with tears in her eyes. Anyway, it would have reached her in a few days. She had had enough of the agony. However, the police threatened to arrest her for a long time after accusing her of selling the medication. Ryan opened the door for the cops when his mother instructed. Trembling with anxiety, Ryan was now unable to stand to think of living without his mother because of his constant concern about her whereabouts. Lizzie's actions had always been plagued by her fear of losing him to an orphanage. However, Lizzie could not bear to abandon the old woman to her anguish. All she wanted was for her suffering to subside, however slightly. John did not hesitate to get in touch with a well-connected acquaintance, giving him instructions to find out Lizzie's location and the gravity of her position. He deliberately ignored his alleged son's presence in the office, preoccupied on his work. What if, in reality, he wasn't his child? What if Lizzie had been pregnant by someone else? But looking at the boy, John couldn't help but notice how much the boy looked like him when he was younger. It was like looking through old photo albums. The friends soon returned with a sum of money that may settle the dispute. He discovered that Lizzie's boss at the clinic where she worked had a personal vendetta against her and had used a small error as an excuse to fire her, a woman who had always stood up for justice. John moved the necessary sum right away and got ready to get Lizzie back. Ryan was provided some clothes. And John told him to change without noticing his co-worker's interested eyes. With his discovered son, he imagined ending this chapter by welcoming Lizzie and her child home. Nevertheless, reuniting with Lizzie triggered a flood of recollections. All John wanted in the midst of the tidal wave of feelings was an opportunity to talk to her. To comprehend, John decided that Lizzie and her child would not remain here once he brought them home. He desired to give them a new beginning, take on the responsibility himself, and purchase a new residence for them. It was difficult to convince Lizzie to accept such a gift without feeling obligated. But John was adamant. Lizzie told John about the clinic head's frequent attempts and his threats to hurt her feelings if she turned them down. John knew he could make it through the challenges ahead, even if it might take some time. He yearned to make amends and provide Lizzie and her child with a better future. I did not pilfer any medication. He gave me permission to take one ampoule. But as it happened, it was a trap. You guys saved Ryan and me. And I don't know what I would have done without you. Why didn't you inform me that I was a parent sooner? John questioned, his hurt clearly audible. It didn't make sense for John to be upset with Lizzie. Despite his own self-reprimands, he was responsible for a lot of things, including her deceit regarding their son. For a long moment Lizzie was silent, as though she was trying to collect her thoughts and find the appropriate words. She then gave John a dejected look. I made an effort. I arrived to notify you about the pregnancy after finding your address. But your father threw me out after he announced that you were getting married. Word of the wedding leaked out. What action was expected of me? You remained silent and refused to engage in conversation. You made no mention of your intention to wed someone else. We separated a few months after the companies merged. It was a marriage of convenience. John attempted to defend himself. Even though I know I don't deserve it, I sincerely hope you could find it in your heart to pardon me. I didn't know about the child, my father didn't inform me. However, that does not lessen my guilt. John stood up, said Lizzie farewell, and walked away, understanding that they both needed time. He had to accept that he was a father, and Lizzie needed to consider her options before continuing to put her trust in someone who had repeatedly failed her. Though John was certain that he would stop at nothing to win this woman over, he was skeptical that she would trust him once more. The dad began making frequent, gift-giving visits to his kid and ex-girlfriend. The boy once extended an invitation for a serious talk. Stop picking on Mom. I appreciate your assistance, but you must decide whether to live with her and give her a sincere apology, or to cease visiting without cause. After your visits, Mom tears in private, she is still in pain. I'm not able to watch her suffer. That's not why I asked for your assistance. John was pleased with his son because he showed courage and knowledge well beyond his years. This gave him confidence, and he finally went up to Lizzie. Lizzie found the strength within herself to forgive John and let go of all the grudges, mending the enormous rift that had previously existed between them. Lizzie moved into John's home with her son, and Ryan was enrolled at a private school where he could pursue his full potential. Newspapers kept running stories about the millionaire who had taken in a homeless youngster and declared him to be his son. John stayed calm and refused to get agitated in the face of attempts by rival journalists to malign him. Although John's father had passed away a number of years ago, he had previously cared what the media said about him. John made the decision to do an interview one day in which he candidly discussed his previous bad choices and errors in the hopes that others would take note of them. His goal was to stop others from making the same mistakes he did. John made sure he regretted his cruel behavior and would never forget it, even in his final days. As a result, the head of the hospital where Lizzie worked was held accountable for his actions. John provided the utmost care and relief from her excruciating agony for Garrison, the woman he looked after, throughout her last days. Lizzie was appreciative with John's kindness for Garrison, his acknowledgement of his progress, and his eventual forgiveness. After watching the stories above, do you have any thoughts? Feel free to share your opinions in the comments section. If you enjoyed our video, please like, subscribe, and share our channel. That's all about today's stories. See you next time.